Hey everyone, I am the Blood Guy, and welcome to the video that I have been teasing and hinting at for quite some time now. Finally getting to the collection video of all of my books, documentaries, movies, everything that I have on true crime, specifically serial killers, mass murderers. Uh, no mafia stuff in this collection video. This is all going to be serial killers, mass murders, stuff like that. I've done a collection video like this back in, I think it was November 2019, where I think all together, I think I might have had like 30 things, books, movies, and documentaries. So, I've been updating it pretty consistently since then. Uh, I was going to do one before Christmas, but then I thought, well, I asked for some for Christmas, so wait till after that. Then with Christmas money and gift cards, I ordered a bunch, and I just kept ordering. And I wanted to wait for everything to come in. But I was going to do a collection video when my books hit 100, when the collection hit 100 books. But the ordering stuff kind of got ahead of me, so now I think we're looking at 131. So it's going to be kind of a lengthy video, but so yeah, these all my books, documentaries, movies on serial killers. Now this is going to be broken up into a few different segments. First, I'll do sort of the encyclopedic books, the ones with a bunch of different killers in them. Then go on to more biographical books, ones on a singular serial killer, and then get into more of the psychology books, ones like John Douglas type books, Mindhunter, ones like that on the minds of a serial killer. And then we'll get into the documentaries and then the films on serial killers. So it's gonna be broken up into a few different parts, but let's get into it. So this is starting with the more encyclopedic books. I'll start with the larger, like the big encyclopedias, and then I'll get to like these smaller paperbacks. But this is the first encyclopedia I ever bought back, I think, in 2011. This one is still my favorite. I think this one is the most comprehensive as far as amount of killers in it, how in-depth it is. It's kind of beat up. This is the second edition. I would like to get the first edition, just something to have, and then maybe get a less beat up version of this. But yeah, this one is still my absolute favorite. And then this is one I've had for a while as well. The World's Most Evil Serial Killers. Kind of similar to that. Only one thing I disagree with is that it has people like Pablo Escobar and Jim Jones in it. They're not serial killers, so I disagree with that. But this is still a very good read. Serial killers and psychopaths, very similar to the last one, especially in format. In fact, I think they're both by the same people, Charlotte Greig and John Marlowe. I have a bunch of books by those two. Then, Last Podcast on the Left, made by the guys who do the Last Podcast on the Left. Last Book on the Left is what I meant to say. This one is pretty much just transcripts of episodes on various serial killers with the kind of comic book art inside. You know, like that's the one for David Berkowitz. Pretty solid read. I really had fun with this one. And then these are two that I ordered recently. The Big Book of Serial Killers by Jack Rosewood, Volume 1 and 2. Cool thing about this is each one has sort of like its own drawing of the killer, then all their stats. But, yeah, Volumes 1 and 2 of that. And then this is a recent one I ordered too. The Monstrous A to Z Encyclopedia on Serial Killers. Another really well done sort of encyclopedia. And another one that breaks up like the stats, years active, number of victims of each one. Pretty extensive. I mean, it has over 250 serial killers in it. And now we get into Harold Schechter, which I don't have all of his books, but I have a decent amount. He's probably my favorite true crime writer. First, we have the Serial Killer Files. the A to Z Encyclopedia on serial killers. And then this one's pretty interesting too. Psycho USA. Famous American killers you never heard of. These are mostly people like pre-H.H. Holmes. Like half of it are, it's almost like Wild West killers, mostly from like the 1800s. But yeah, there's really no one in here that I think I'd heard of prior. I think the highest it goes is like the late 1920s. So it's like pre-H.H. Holmes, pre-Albert Fish, stuff like that. So then, this is just a really old one that I found, I think, for like less than $5, but serial killers, they love to kill. Pretty thick book, but yeah, kind of looks like a super generic. But of course, it's still a very interesting read. They all always are. This is a book that I would say anyone getting into serial killers and doesn't have anything on any of them, which I also just forgot to mention wearing my serial killer alphabet shirt. This would be a really good starting point, like a good first book for someone getting into serial killers. That is the Wikipedia Encyclopedia of Serial Killers, which I want to find like a good example here. Let's just go to Ted Bundy. That's always a good starting point, because it's set up to look exactly like their Wikipedia page. All the articles and paragraphs are split up the same way as their encyclopedia page. All the same photos, and it pretty much has all the important ones. All the ones that matter are in this. So it will be a really good first book, kind of like as a reference, just because of how it breaks everything up. You know, damn glare, like born, died, aliases, date apprehended, victim number, motives, penalty, important dates and places, stuff like that. So this would be a really good starting point for people that want to get into the topic. Then we have serial killers, the minds, methods, and mayhem of history's most notorious serial killers. Yeah, some of these next books are more psychology driven, but they're still split up. Like each chapter is a different killer, whereas some of the later ones is more prose, written like prose, but with a bunch of killers in it. So these are still more encyclopedic. But yeah, this is more like the psychological angle, you know, for people that really takes us into the mind of a killer, which really drives me nuts when people say that, because some of them, like Dahmer, we're never going to understand why they do what they did, but still a very solid read. And then the killer book of serial killers. I know there's also the killer book of, I think, the mafia, and then the killer book of true crime. This actually has some trivia and exercises in the back. I don't want to put marks in it, so I won't be doing it. But there's a bunch of American ones. It's very similar to the Minds and Methods book, where it kind of goes more into the methods, motives of serial killers. Has a bunch of American ones, and then each chapter is one from a different country, like Pedro Lopez, Colombia, Carla Homolka, Paul Bernardo, Canada. So another really solid, more psychological angle one. This is one that I bought twice because I actually forgot that I already owned it. But anyone who's really into serial killers will know the name Peter Vronsky. I have a few books by him, but this is Serial Killers, The Method and Madness of Monsters. One of these is the first edition, and then one is the second. So one is more updated. I believe this is the updated one. But I had forgot that I owned it, so I actually bought it twice. But then also by Peter Vronsky, we have American Serial Killers, The Deadliest Years, 1950 to 2000. Again, pretty much just breaks down each one. It goes chronologically. And then this I bought because I ended up buying a lot of really thin books, like this one by Jack Rosewood, and I thought this book was going to have all of those put into it, but Jack Rosewood, the serial killer books, I thought it was going to have all or some of like the really thin books that he wrote in this one. It doesn't, but it's still a solid read. Jack Rosewood is one of the best true crime writers that we have, so glad to have this along with his 2 volumes of the big book. And I did the same thing with this because Jack Smith does a lot of these really thin books as well. But this is volume 2 of Serial Killers. I thought this was going to have, it said anthology, so I thought it was going to have a number of these small books inside of it. But no, it's really kind of just a quick reference of each killer, 2 or 3 pages. But I'll never turn down a serial killer book. Then we have Cannibal Killers, which is an interesting read. This is a really old book. But yeah, Cannibal Killers. So those are the big encyclopedic ones. I guess before we get into the smaller paperbacks, sort of the next thing kind of similar would be sort of zines or book magazines or prestige format magazines, like The Most Notorious Crimes. I think this was actually the first book I ever bought. I think I was still in high school when I bought this. And then like The World's Most Evil Serial Killers. Every time I come across a new magazine like this in the store, I always pick it up. The Most Notorious Serial Killers. The Serial Killer Coloring Book. I actually forgot that was in there with these. Those coloring books are actually pretty fun. Killer Cults. One on the Zodiac. I believe this was for the 50th anniversary. Another one on cults. Cults, gurus, and grifters. Then we have one just on a bunch of different kidnapping cases. Of course, Adam Walsh right on the cover. And then there was one just on the OJ case. So whenever I come across a new book like this at the grocery store or whatever, I always make sure to pick it up. So those are the zines or prestige format magazines I have. This is actually one that I can't keep on my shelf. There's no room for it. I wasn't expecting it to be this large and not be able to put it on the shelf, but the Visual Encyclopedia of Serial Killers. And yeah, this thing's pretty massive. I think I found this for like less than 15 bucks. But yeah, it got all the major ones, got a ton of photos, crime scene photos, even autopsy photos. It's got some, there's pretty heavy stuff in it. Got quite a bit of people. Yeah. So this one's a bit more graphic than your typical encyclopedia. But, it's got pretty much all the major ones. But yeah, this is one I kind of have to keep like on the very top of the shelf because it just doesn't fit. But this is one that I really like. The Visual Encyclopedia. And so finishing up the more encyclopedic portion of the collection. All these books, one are the smaller paperbacks, but these are all from a publishing company called Arcturus, if I can pronounce it right, Arcturus. They do a lot of true crime books, and these are all part of the same series, or 2 different series, but from the same company. And a lot of them are from Charlotte Grieg and John Marlowe. But we have The World's Worst Crimes, A to Z. Chambers of Horror. This one's by John Marlowe. This one is all stuff like Fritz Honka's house, Dahmer's house, stuff like that. So, Chambers of Horror. We have Evil Women, self-explanatory. And then Serial Killers. This was pretty straightforward. This one has, and a lot of these are actually broken up by the same kinds of chapters, like Angels of Death, Crazed Cannibals, Highway Hunters, Psycho Snipers, Rape Slayers, Ruthless Rippers, Sadistic Stranglers. A lot of books in like this series have those same chapters, along with Serial Killers and Psychopaths, which, yeah, now we're getting into the other Arcturus books. We had this series, and now we have Serial Killers and Psychopaths. Straightforward serial killers. Then we have evil serial killers. Again, there with the Gacy on the cover. Got Angels of Death with Elizabeth Wettlaufer, I think is how you pronounce her name, on the cover. This is all doctors, nurses, caregivers. And this one's by Al Cimino. Women Who Kill. Of course, any book you have about female killers, Warnos is going to be on the cover. Also by Al Cimino. We have Mass Killers. Now, this book, I think I mentioned it before in one of my videos. This one is all more mass killers, specifically like modern shooters. You know, you got Elliot Rodger there on the cover. This doesn't have mass murders so much as school shootings or family annihilation. It's mostly just, you know, school or public shootings. Yeah. So, mass killers. I think I just messed up what I said. It's mostly shootings. So, not like, yeah, family annihilations or stuff like that. Then we have the 10 Worst Serial Killers, which, as you can see on the cover, got, I think that's Peter Curtin, Andre Chikatilo, John Christie, Robert Pickton. Yeah, 10 Most Evil. And then The Science of Serial Killers. This is another one that's more sort of the minds, method kind of angle. And then this is something I found pretty cheap. Now, back in the early 90s, there was this set of trading cards called True Crime, where each card was a different criminal. And they were broken up into serial killers and gangsters. And people tried to get them banned. They were very controversial. You can buy the whole sets of the cards, which I would love to do. But I found this for cheap, so I decided to get this first. But it's a small book. It says Volume 2. That's because Volume 1 is all like the mafia stuff. This is all the serial killers and mass murders of the first series of true crime cards. It has the artwork of the card on the front and then the summary of the killer that's on the back of the card. Then, of course, there's the series of True Crime 2, which has the same thing. Then there's Crime and Punishment cards. Again, you can buy the whole set of the cards, but I found this for cheap, so I wanted to pick that up. And I really do like the artwork in it. So then more from like the Arcturus books. Serial Killers, another one by Charlotte Grieg. Pretty straightforward book. Then we have another one straightforward, Serial Killers, which there's another one in this series of Killer Women, and then I think there's Killer Cults as well. And so then we get into the Profiles and Crime series, which I think I have all but the cult one. But we have Serial Killers of the 70s, Serial Killers of the 80s, How to Catch a Killer, and Extreme Killers. This is one with like the highest body counts. So I think the only one that there isn't, or the only one that I don't have, is the Killer Cults. So I'll pick that up at some time. It would be cool if there was like a 60s and the 90s book, but it's cool to have these ones. So those are all the books I have that are more encyclopedic or have more than one killer in it. And so getting into the more biographical portion, or autobiographical in some cases, these are all books centered around one killer per book. So starting off, actually start with this one. Also by Al Cimino, and this is also part of that Arcturus series. We have Ted Bundy. Yeah, first, I have all books of alike killers put together, and sort of in order of sort of like my favorite cases, or to a certain point. So Ted Bundy, always been my favorite, always been my favorite case. I guess if I had to say my favorite killer, he'd be number one. So Ted Bundy's first with this book. And we have The Phantom Prince, which I just talked about. The memoir by his longtime girlfriend, Elizabeth Kendall, Klepfer in real life. Conversations with the Killer, Ted Bundy, which of course, you know, also the this was kind of the basis for the Netflix series. Great book and great documentary as well. And then by by Kevin Sullivan, who's actually written quite a few. We have the Ted Bundy Murders, Comprehensive History, along with the Encyclopedia of the Ted Bundy Murders. And he's written other ones, like there's the Enigma of Ted Bundy, Trial of Ted Bundy, I think Ted Bundy Murder Mysteries. He's written like 4 or 5. These are the 2 that I have so far. And I forgot to mention in the beginning of the video, the amount of books I have in this collection video, I have well over 100 more in my wish list. So yes, I'm aware of all the different Bundy books that are out there, and I do intend on getting them, yes. Probably the most definitive book on Bundy and Rules, The Stranger Beside Me. Of course, you gotta have that. These 2 by Al Carlisle, who was the psychiatrist appointed to him during the trial, the attempted kidnapping trial in 75, or 76 rather. We have the 1976 psychological assessment, and I Am Not Guilty, which is pretty much the case overall. And then this one's really cool, the Ultimate Ted Bundy Collection, which of this series, there's also a Gacy one, Ramirez, Manson, I think there's the Gein Confession, 2018 Ed Kemper parole transcript, and a Columbine one. And pretty much what it is just a bunch of documents, news, articles, transcripts of interviews and stuff, all surrounding Bundy. So that's pretty sweet. And then we have Ted Bundy, A Visual Timeline, which is literally every date that has to do with something, along with photos, transcripts, news articles, maps, photos of places and things. In fact, I think that was just a... Oh no. So, that's really cool. So that's everything I have on Bundy. Next up, we have who would have to be my second favorite, which would be Dennis Rader, BTK, by John Douglas, Mindhunter himself, Inside the Mind of BTK. From Dr. Catherine Ramsland, Confessions of a Serial Killer, The Untold Story of Dennis Rader, the BTK Killer. I have seen the documentary for this, or at least I think I've seen half of it. Whenever it's on YouTube, that's what I've seen. I will find a way to watch the whole thing and then do a review on that, which I'm going to set that aside for a second, because then we have Unholy Messenger, The Life and Crimes of BTK Serial Killer, a book by his daughter, Carrie Rawson, serial killer's daughter. And we also have 2, cover up my address, 2 response letters from Dennis Rader when I wrote to him. Aside from those, we have this original drawing which is Series 1, 3 of 6. It made it out to me, to John. So that's an original drawing that he sent me. I got 2 response letters from BTK, and he mentions both of these books in the first letter that he sent me. So I have those. And then my third would have to be, of course, Ed Kemper, which we have Conversations with the Killer, Ed Kemper. And then these were those thin books that I was talking about, because this is Jack Rosewood. I got a bunch of books that are like this, and I thought the Jack Rosewood serial killer books was sort of a compilation or anthology of all these. But we got one of Ed Kemper. And then I thought these books were going to be a lot thicker too, but Hourly History. I was going to get more of these, but I did just find a box set with I think 6 of these Hourly History books in them. So I held off on buying them. I got one of Ed Kemper. Then my third favorite would have to be Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, which we have another one by Ann Rule, Green River Running Red, The Search for the Green River Killer, which this is actually, I think this is a first edition. This is back when Green River was still not caught. And it even has details of how to get the $50,000 reward that they were offering. Eventually, I believe it was $1 million, but at one point it was $50,000. And then this, I didn't know whether to put this with Bundy or Ridgway, but there's Bob Keppel's The Riverman, which is all about how Bundy sent Keppel and Detective David Reichert a letter saying, hey, you want to find this Green River guy? I can help you. So they went and did a series of interviews, and he didn't really offer much to help them, but eventually turned into a series of interviews about himself. But that's what this is about. It is about the hunt for Gary Ridgway. It does get into Gary Ridgway at some point, but I think for the most part, because this just came in recently, I think it is more of like a Bundy book. But yeah, I've seen this go for a lot of money, and I was able to find it for like $5 on thrift books. So that's everything I have on Bundy, BTK, Kemper, and Ridgway, along with the 2 letters from BTK himself. And then rounding off the books of my top 5 favorites would be Robert Hansen from Alaska. We have The Butcher Baker by Jack Smith. And these were the books that I thought that volume 2 from earlier was going to consist of. I thought those volumes were actually anthologies of these thin books. But we got The Butcher Baker by Jack Smith. And again, Butcher Baker by Walter Gilmore. I think this is known to be like the definitive book on Robert Hansen. Very fascinating story. I've always been fascinated by Hansen. And so then I guess just more of who else is in my top 10. Of course, you have this killer who I think everyone's going to have stuff on. I would say Jeffrey Dahmer is the one that I have the second most material on next to Bundy. But we got Monster, True Story of the Jeffrey Dahmer Murders, Inside the Mind of Jeffrey Dahmer, and The Jeffrey Dahmer Story, along with, of course, My Friend Dahmer, the graphic novel, and A Father Story by Lionel. So, not a whole lot. I know there's a lot more on Dahmer, but that's what I have. And then also from Dahmer, you can get this from the museum in Chicago, but it's like a little skull made out of some kind of resin, but it has dirt from the grounds where the Oxford Apartments stood, along with this little certified placard. But yeah, it's kind of cool. It also comes in vials. I'll set that there. So then we have another book by Harold Schechter, Deviant, about Ed Gein, which with Ed Gein we have a vial of dirt from his where his farmhouse was. My girlfriend has the vial of dirt from his gravesite, but we got that. And this is the only book I have on Gein. This is known as sort of the definitive work on Gein. I know there's several books consisting of like his FBI files and his confession. Like the John Borowski book is his whole confession, but this is the only one that I have. And then known as the British Jeffrey Dahmer, Dennis Nilsen, we have History of a Drowning Boy, which is his autobiography, came out after his death in 2018. And this is what the Netflix Memories of a Murder documentary is sort of inspired by. Killing for Company. This is the inspiration for the 3-part TV movie Des, which I'll get to. And then we have the Dennis Nilsen tapes and Russ Coffey's Conversations with the Killer. So that's what I have on Dennis Nilsen. And then some other ones that I have. We got I did not realize this book was this big, but Son of Sam. I found this for super cheap. Maybe I'll get to this Netflix series at some point. I don't really buy into the story that there were multiple killers, but The Ultimate Evil, The Search of the Sons of Sam. And something I have from David Berkowitz is I do have a response letter from the one that I sent, along with this pamphlet of his story and how he found God. So I got that from David Berkowitz. And then just these super thin, almost pamphlet-like books, both called Son of Sam. Then we go on to John Wayne Gacy, which this is by John Borowski. Similar to that Ted Bundy book, it's really just a bunch of court documents, news articles, photos, court and confession transcripts, stuff like that. He has several books that are like this. One I'll get to, but there's also Dahmer's Confession, one of H.H. Holmes, and the Ed Gein file, confession and case documents. He's also done a number of documentaries. There is a documentary that goes with this by John Borowski, which has more of this artwork on it that I always thought was cool. One of the more definitive works on John Wayne Gacy, this is Terry Sullivan, who worked as, I believe he was the county prosecutor that actually gave or signed the 2 search warrants of Killer Clown. Defending a Monster. This is by Sam Amoranti, who was John Wayne Gacy's defense attorney during his trial. This is actually the book that I'm reading now. I just started it. And then we have Inside the Mind of John Wayne Gacy. I think similar to that series of the Dahmer one. And this is an older book, but Buried Dreams, Inside the Mind of a Serial Killer by Tim Cahill. I was able to find most of these very, very cheap. And similar to the Jeffrey Dahmer one, I have the John Wayne Gacy skull with the dirt from his 8213 North Somerdale Avenue address. It doesn't matter if that house was torn down. It's still the same dirt, same address, only this one's painted like Pogo. Again, from the museum in Chicago. And so then this will wrap up the more biographical book section of this collection. First up, another book by John Borowski, Albert Fish, in his own words. Again, this is pretty much a transcription of his entire confession, newspaper articles, stuff like that. And again by Harold Schechter, Deranged, another book on Albert Fish. And then more thin books. We got Joel Rifkin, Joel the Ripper by Jack Rosewood and Rebecca Lowe. There's actually several books that they did together. And then another one by Jack Rosewood, Jerry Brudos, the Shoe Fetish Slayer. And then this is a killer I just talked about in my last video, the Genesee River Killer, Arthur Shawcross. We got the true story of Arthur Shawcross, and Jack Olson's The Misbegotten Son, which is a pretty thick hardcover. So we got those two books on Arthur Shawcross. And then this is a really old copy of this book, but I found it super cheap. Gerald Frank's The Boston Strangler. This is the book that the 1968 film is based on. So then probably the biggest book on Richard Ramirez, The Night Stalker by Philip Carlo. Probably the biggest book on the Hillside Stranglers. Hillside Stranglers by Darcy O'Brien. And then this is a newer version. It was originally released as The Confessions of Henry Lee Lucas. Now it's just The Confession Killer. And this is one that I didn't even know about. I know that there's several books on this killer, but I found this one for like less than $5. It's called Hunting the Devil by Richard Laurie. It's all about the pursuit, capture, and confession of Andre Chikatilo. I know there's a book called The Red Ripper. There's like a psychoanalyst book called Comrade Chikatilo. This is the only one I have on him specifically. I know there's a ton of books on him. So then, this is another killer I wrote to, but haven't got any response yet. Murder in Spokane, about Robert Lee Yates. This is another sort of, I guess, semi autobiography. The real story of the Gainesville murders in the killer's own words. The Making of a Serial Killer by Danny Rowling. There's a lot of his drawings in here. It's written more like an encyclopedia, but because it's broken up into different articles. But a pretty interesting read. Again, Danny Rowling, a Gainesville Ripper. A few more. We have autobiography by Eileen Warnos, Monster. I do know of her book, Dear Dawn. That is one that I would like to pick up. Of course, this is the one that the movie was inspired by. Then we have a few on Wayne Williams, the Atlanta child murderer. We got Child Killer by Jack Rosewood. Murder and Mystery in Atlanta. Which, there's one more. The Atlanta Child Murders. Also called The Night Stalker. This one's by Jack Mallard. These three all came in at the same time just recently, so I haven't had a chance to read these yet. But I am fairly well versed in the Wayne Williams story. I will be checking out the near 5-hour TV movie from 1985. So we got those. And, of course, I do have a couple books on Manson. Similar to the Arcturus books, we got Charles Manson, and what many consider to be the true crime book of Helter Skelter. This was one of the first books I got as well. I got this when I was still in high school. I do not have the Conversations with the Killer book of Manson. There's a ton of books on Manson. Another one by Harold Schechter, A Depraved. This one's on H.H. Holmes. And then another one on H.H. Holmes, Devil in the White City. I believe this is the one that the Scorsese film will be based on, if that ever comes out. So we got two on Holmes. And then just a few more. Another one by Jack Olson, The Creation of a Serial Killer, on Keith Jesperson, which I do have a response letter from Keith Jesperson. I actually have two. The other one's actually still out in my glove box. But in the second letter he wrote me, he did not talk highly of this book. So guess we'll see how good it is. Then, of course, we got another one on Keith Jesperson, another one by Jack Smith, the Happy Face Murderer. God, sorry I'm stuttering so much. I don't know why. Probably the a Zodiac book by Robert Graysmith, Zodiac. And then this was just something I found in my grandmother's house. I think it's more of just like a tourist book. But a Lizzie Borden, which my girlfriend and I are actually going to stay a weekend in her house this spring. We've already got it booked. I'm very excited for that. Then the last couple I have is my girlfriend got me this for Christmas. I Would Find a Girl Walking. This one's by Gerald Stano. Toy Box Killers, about Roy Norris and Lawrence Bittaker. Not to be confused with the Toy Box Killer, David Parker Ray. But these guys did some brutal stuff. This one's a little bit thicker than some of the other books by Rosewood and Lowe. But I think this is part of the same series as like their Dahmer book and a few other ones. The Basement by R.J. Parker. Another very thin book, but this is about Gary Heidnik. I know there's another one called Cellar of Horrors. I think it's supposed to be like the book on Gary Heidnik. He's another one of the 5 killers that inspired Buffalo Bill. He did a lot of twisted stuff too. And then there's a few books on Columbine. Some of them really not that good, but this is No Easy Answers, The Truth Behind Columbine. And then these ones I should have done earlier, but I have to keep them at this space on the end on the shelf because it's the only place they fit. And I found these at a flea market for like $1 each, but Serial Killers and Mass Murderers. I know there's another one in this series just called True Crime, and then another one about the Mafia. So those are all the more biographical or autobiographical books I have. And the only other letter that I have is one by Todd Collett, which this is kind of a graphic letter. He talks about some of the stuff he's done in prison. So I've sent about 30 letters, but only a few have actually written back. I do still write Keith Jesperson and Dennis Rader. And so this is actually a book that I keep forgetting I have, but it's called There But for the Grace of God. And all it is each chapter is a first-hand account of all these people that survived, really notorious serial killers, such as David Berkowitz, Bobby Joe Long, Richard Speck, Ted Bundy, BTK, Derek Todd Lee, and Jeffrey Dahmer. It's a very old book. It's falling apart, but quite interesting. This is a Beat to Hell book that actually came for free when I bought that smaller Arthur Shawcross book. Not really a serial killer, I guess mass murderer, but in the form of, I guess it would be infanticide or something like that. But the story of Andrea Yates, how she drowned her 5 boys. And then this is just one of the biggest true crime murder stories ever. Truman Capote's In Cold Blood. Of course, I think everyone needs to have that. So then these are more like the psychological books, more psychology reference books or stuff like that. Of course, I think the most important one, Mindhunter, John Douglas himself. Also by John Douglas, The Anatomy of a Motive. Now, there are other ones by John Douglas. There's The Killer Across the Table. There's the one that he wrote before Mindhunter. And there's at least one other one. I know there's like 2 or 3 other John Douglas books that I don't have. But of course, Mindhunter, Anatomy of a Motive. These are more of the books in this section. From Bob Keppel, of course, Signature Killers. All about, killers' signatures, MOs, stuff like that. Bob Keppel, worked on the Bundy case. This is My Life Among the Serial Killers by Dr. Helen Morrison, more along the same lines. And then getting into profiling, of course, probably the biggest profiler, or the one that really started profiling, Robert K. Ressler. We have Whoever Fights Monsters, which has been a very helpful book, I think. From what I've heard, is a pretty well-regarded book when it comes to profiling. Also by Ressler, and also with Ann Burgess and John Douglas. A book all on patterns and motives of sexual homicide. And then this is just a book on different investigations of the various serial killers. This is one that came in very recently, so I haven't had time to thumb through this one yet. And then this is just one on like the inside story of criminal profiling, killer psychopaths. This is kind of an odd book that I found. It's called Lustmord, which is really just kind of transcriptions of a bunch of different poems, letters, postcards of various killers, different things they've written to police, or things they've left at, or things they've written in prison, or left at crime scenes, drawings left or made by killers. I thought that was interesting, so I picked that up. And then this was something I found really cheap, The Science of Vampires, now, which again, Catherine Ramsland. Now, no, it's not about vampires, but it's all about the psychology of people with a blood fetish. So, of course, I found that very interesting. And then just to top it all off, just a book on serial killer trivia. And then, kind of as a bonus, I figured I'd throw these in here. I'll probably talk about these again when I do my Dexter collection. But blood spatter analysis has been my dream job for probably a decade at this point. This is just various forms of forensics that are used at crime scenes. But I do have 3 textbooks on blood spatter, bloodstain pattern analysis. This was the first one that I got. Interpretations of bloodstain evidence at crime scenes, and Blood Secrets, which chronicles of a crime scene reconstructionist, but all about blood. So I love those books. And then this one is a bit more about various types of forensics, I think DNA in general, but it does have a lot about blood spatter in it. And then this is the forensic case book. That's kind of a little bit about everything, but does have a lot about blood spatter in it as well. So those are all the books that I have on true crime, serial killers, mass murders. And so we move on to the DVD portion. And I'm going to start by saying, despite what I have here, I have a huge, huge wish list of ones to get to. Unfortunately, a lot of true crime programs dealing with serial killers are British programs, so a lot of them are Region 2 DVD, which I do have a region-free player, but they're extremely pricey. So this is just what I have so far. First we have the box set of Inside the Criminal Mind, which consists of America's Serial Killers, Rampage, and then just some unsolved stuff. Which, before I got this, for the longest time, the only one I had was the actual DVD itself of America's Serial Killers. Which, America's Serial Killers, Making a Serial Killer, and most of the Becoming Evil series is most of the same thing. I will say that Becoming Evil, both Serial Killers and Rampage, which is all mass murder, does have a little bit more in it than what's in the Inside the Criminal Minds portion of it. So if you get these, I think you get everything that's in Inside the Criminal Mind, or America's Serial Killers and Rampage, but you get a little bit more. This pretty much has the same as everything in Inside the Criminal Mind. But then we have this set, and I know there's more individual DVDs of this, but A&E was one of the first things I ever watched on serial killers. So I'm glad to have this set, which has 4 episodes, one on the criminal profiler, Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, and Charles Manson. But I know you can get other A&E DVDs, like there's one of Bundy, Arthur Shawcross, Gary Ridgway. I think you can get Dahmer by itself, but still am glad to have this. This, I think, is a bootleg because I think it was mainly just a VHS before. But Serial Killers, the Real Life Hannibal Lecters, which it's only like an hour long. I actually haven't sat down to watch this yet. This just came in. I've heard it's pretty short, just kind of breezes through, doesn't really have anything new in it, but still glad to have it. This is an old program, The Serial Killers. It doesn't have as many as I thought. I mean, each disc, 3 discs, has 4 or 5 different killers on it. Sort of your typical 45-minute kind of documentaries on each one. And then this is something I found for cheap. Forensic Files, just a collection of different episodes or aspects of various serial killers. Now, this is my favorite sort of documentary on a single serial killer, and I'm so glad to own this. Conversations with the Serial Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes. This is my favorite one. I wish they would make more, like, of all 3 of them. I don't know why there's only the Bundy tapes, but it would be great if Gacy and Dahmer would get their DVD as well. So this is my favorite one. But then we have the Jeffrey Dahmer Files by IFC. Really good documentary just surrounding the events before, during, and after his arrest. Inside Evil, an NBC interview set of Dahmer and David Berkowitz. I thought this was going to have the whole Stone Phillips interview with Dahmer. The whole special is only 74 minutes, so it's really just excerpts of each interview. There's also NBC Inside Evil of the BTK Confession, which I would love to get. Then we have the 2 Eileen Wuornos documentaries, The Selling of a Serial Killer and The Life and Death of a Serial Killer. Really enjoyed both of these. I've reviewed these, along with the Jeffrey Dahmer Files and the Ted Bundy tapes. H.H. Holmes, America's First Serial Killer, which this, along with Albert Fish, in his own words, I've reviewed these. These are both John Borowski films. I don't own his Carl Panzram film, but I reviewed that as well. And then this one's very interesting. The Iceman interviews. Now, I've always hesitated to call him a serial killer. I thought he was mostly just a mafia hitman. But he did do plenty of killings outside contracts. But this has the Iceman tapes, Conversations with the Serial Killer, the Iceman, Secrets of a Mafia Hitman, and the Iceman and the Psychiatrist. Which, I think 2 of these were HBO specials, but it comes with 3 specials centered around the Iceman. I found this for like $10. Very glad to have that. And then this I've had for a while, the 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter, which I think is more so how everything surrounding the Manson case is connected. It's been probably over 15 years since I've actually watched this. I don't remember too much about it, but I've had it for a long time. And then this I bought really used. I did not know this was part of a 2-disc set, but Crimes of the Century. This is more assassinations and unsolved. I guess disc 2 that this is supposed to come with is more serial killers and mass murders. But, oh well, still have this. So those are all the documentaries I have. Again, I have like a full wish list of about 30 to 40 more documentaries and DVDs that I'd like to get to. And so the final portion of this collection video is films actually based on real-life serial killers. I've already reviewed most of these. There's only a few left I have to get to. And again, despite what I have here, I have a huge list of other ones to eventually get to, whether there is a DVD or you can only find them elsewhere, like TV movies or whatever. But again, these are sort of all put together by I Like Killers, so starting off with Ted Bundy. The first one ever made was the 1986 TV movie, A Deliberate Stranger. Very good Bundy movie. I'd probably say this one handles the story the best. Most of the TV movies are like 3 hours. Then we have the 2002 Ted Bundy with Michael Riley Burke. The Stranger Beside Me, based on Anne Rule's book. This one's okay. TV movie. Best thing about it is that it has Barbara Hershey as Anne Rule. Then we just have Bundy, aka Bundy, A Legacy of Evil, or An American Icon, with Corin Nemec. This one leaves a lot out of the Bundy story. But I'd say that one and the Michael Riley Burke one are more so slasher films. This is a TV movie, more so based on a certain time of Bundy's life. The Riverman, based on the book of the same name. This one has Cary Elwes as Bundy, about when Bundy trying to help out Keppel and Reichert solve the Green River case. Which, that one is much better than Ted Bundy and the Green River Killer, which I don't own, but I have reviewed it. This is probably the best made Bundy movie, and that is Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile. Of course, this is Region 2. I think the only way you can get it is Region 2. Yeah, I'd say this is the best made one. As far as quality of film and most accurate, I do enjoy this film. I know people don't like it because it doesn't show any of the murders, which people have a problem with. I'd say this one has the best performance or portrayal of Bundy, the most accurate portrayal of Bundy. That is No Man of God, which just centers around the last years of Bundy on death row, him confessing to Bill Hagmaier, a FBI profiler, before he gets executed. Very good film, excellent portrayal of Bundy. I have reviewed that one. And then this is probably the best BTK movie that I've seen. The Hunt for the BTK Killer. This is a TV movie. This one has Greg Henry as a Dennis Rader. Not really about the crimes. It's more so just about the investigation from 2004 up until his capture in 2005. But I thought this was a very solid film. Great portrayal of Dennis Rader. This one, not so much. This guy, Michael Pfeiffer, he's directed several, and these are the ones I'd say are towards the bottom. I believe he did the Corin Nemec Bundy movie. They're a step above Uwe Lamel, which isn't saying much, but this is with Kane Hodder as BTK. It's really not that great, but it's better than Uwe Lamel's BTK Killer. This film sucked unbelievably. So then we go on to Ed Kemper. The only movie I think that's been made of him, Kemper, the co-ed killer. I ranted on this. This is not a good one. This is just sort of the Michael Pfeiffer quality, just a step above Uwe Lamel. Not really Ed Kemper at all. I would say this one is good. More about the investigation than Robert Hansen himself, but Frozen Ground, watching it the second time for the review, it was more accurate than I remember it being the first time around. But this is more of a solid film than it is a really good look into a true crime story. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of Green River films out there, but another Uwe Lamel film. This is probably the better of his serial killer movies, but that's not saying much. The Capture of the Green River Killer, which I don't own, that's a 3-hour TV movie, much, much better. And so then we get into Jeffrey Dahmer, and there's been several on Dahmer, which first I'll just show this. This is a 3-killer pack. This is one of the first ones I ever bought, like, of films based on killers. We got 2002's Dahmer, 2003's Gacy, and 2000's Ed Gein. I do not own Ed Gein Butcher Plainfield, which again I believe is a Michael Pfeiffer film. I've reviewed it. It's not that good at all. This one's not bad. That's not terrible for a Gacy film. The Jeremy Renner Dahmer film, it's a bullet point film. You don't get a whole lot out of it except for just these are all key moments of Dahmer's life. Though I'll say it's better than the first Dahmer film ever made, The Secret Life of Jeffrey Dahmer. This is the most straightforward one about him. It's more so like an exploitation slasher film almost. This actually came out when Dahmer was still alive, 1993. It's not terrible when compared to like Uwe Lamel, but it's the most straightforward. You know, it doesn't try to depict Dahmer in any kind of light or anything like that. It kind of just shows the murders for what they were. Not terribly accurate either. But, of course, well, then we get My Friend Dahmer, of course, based on the graphic novel. People don't like this just because it's about Dahmer in high school. It doesn't show any of the murders. I thought it was very, very good. I would put this on the level of Extremely Wicked for Bundy. There's a reason why it doesn't show the murders. I thought Ross Lynch did a great job as young Dahmer. A really good look into the high school life, the pre-killer life of one of the most notorious serial killers. I've always liked that film. But of course, the best Dahmer whatever out there is, of course, Dahmer. I know there's other DVDs that's been put out since this. This is just like a bootleg from, I think, Japan. But it plays, works just fine, has all the episodes. I really like the quality of how it came out. This is the serial killer series or film to beat all serial killer films. The most accurate, the best made, the best portrayal of any of them. I loved this series. Can't wait for season 2 and 3 of Monster. Very excited for it. So a Gacy film that's better than the 2003 one, the 1992 TV movie, To Catch a Killer, with Brian Dennehy as Gacy. Another 3-hour TV movie. This one was very good. I really enjoyed it. So then films on Dennis Nilsen. We have Cold Light of Day from the 80s. This is more like Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, both in style and how loosely based it is. Not really meant to be accurate, but very loosely based on Dennis Nilsen. But still a very good film. He's not named Dennis Nilsen in this film, but there's more of Nilsen's story in this than there is Henry Lee Lucas in Henry. But this I'm very excited to get to. Des, starring David Tennant as Dennis Nilsen. I know this is more about the aftermath of his arrest, doesn't really show the murders, but it looks great. I cannot wait to see it. So then just some other films I have. We got Drifter, Henry Lee Lucas, another one by Michael Pfeiffer. Definitely more accurate than Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, but this is a much better film. I think a lot of people say this is their favorite only because it's the most effective as like a horror film, and as far as 80s go, like the most shocking. People that don't really care for historical accuracy as long as there's gruesome, shocking parts in it. I think that's why a lot of people like this. I really like this film. I would give this film more credit for its accuracy, but this is a much, 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 much better film. This one is a classic. And there is a reason why it's so historically inaccurate. And it's because we don't know a whole lot about Lucas, or at least what's true. So a few more. Of course, Monster. Another one of my all-time favorites as far as just quality of film, historical accuracy, the portrayal of the killer. Charlize Theron as Warnos is flawless. I love this movie. This is another bootleg of a TV movie because it has never been released, but Out of the Darkness, about the search for the son of Sam. I do wish that um, who is the guy? What's the guy's name? Doesn't even say it. But the guy that plays Berkowitz, I do wish he had more scenes, but not a bad film. It's more about Eddie's ego. Now, Uwe Lammel's Son of Sam was a piece of shit. I hated that movie. So then we get into the films on Andre Chikatilo, Citizen X. Very good film. This was a TV movie for HBO. Jeffrey DeMunn as Chikatilo is great, even though he doesn't have very many scenes. I would say I liked it more than Evelenko. This is loosely based on Chikatilo. His name isn't even Andre Chikatilo in this film, but it's still very close to the Chikatilo story. I would say that this one's better. So then we got Uwe Lammel's Night Stalker, which was a piece of shit. I still have not seen the 2002 Night Stalker film or the 1989 Manhunt film, but I have seen the 2016 one with Lou Diamond Phillips, and that one was really good. Gray Man, about Albert Fish. This one was actually pretty solid. A really good TV movie, See No Evil, about the Moors murders, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. This is part of a trilogy, also with, I think it's This Is Personal, about the Yorkshire Ripper, and Appropriate Adult, which I've seen This Is Personal. I haven't seen Appropriate Adult, which is about Fred and Rosemary West. Other British ones I've seen Harold Shipman. I've reviewed that. I have not seen A is for Acid, or there's one other one that comes in like a box set with them. Golden Glove, sort of Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer from Germany, about Fritz Honka. Very good film. Very, very good film. Pretty kind of hard to watch in some spots, but very much like a 2019 2019 or was it 2009? 2019. Sort of like a 2019 German Fritz Honka version of Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. Not really meant to be accurate. It's not the most accurate film. And then some of the last few that I have, we got The Freeway Killer, which was surprisingly good. Not great, but is decent. About William Bonin. The guy that plays him, Scott Anthony Elite, did a great job as William Bonin. The Hillside Strangler with C. Thomas Howell and Nicholas Turturro. Possibly the best Hillside Strangler movie that I've seen. I started the one with Billy Zane, The Case of the Hillside Strangler. So far, it wasn't that good, but I do have Rampage, The Hillside Strangler Murders. This film is pretty awful. If you want to see a Hillside Strangler movie, check out the one with C. Thomas Howell. It's surprisingly good, shows the murders, pretty accurate. I was surprised by how accurate it was, and good performances by Howell and Turturro as Bianchi and Buono. Then we got The Boston Strangler. Not a terrible movie. I mean, the guy that plays DeSalvo was alright. I have not seen the 1968 film yet. I do plan on seeing it. I haven't even watched this one yet, because this one is more about what if that other, the prisoner that DeSalvo confessed to, what if he was the killer? I haven't really given it a chance yet. At some point I will. But then we got, of course, 1974's Helter Skelter with Steve Railsback as Manson. It's more about the trial. I actually had to find time to sit down and watch this. This is another 3-hour film. I know it was remade in 2004. I don't have that one. There's a lot of films on Manson. I'm not interested in hypothetical ones like My Name is Charlie or I think it's called like Manson, My Name is Evil, which is about like a follower later on. I'm not interested in that. I wouldn't mind seeing Charlie Says with the guy that plays the 11th Doctor. But yeah, there's a bunch of Manson out there, including the Manson family. This is another one I'll have to find time to watch because this is like 4 hours long. I've seen it once. I don't remember anything about it, but this is the unrated version, so I'll definitely check that out. Killer, A Journal of Murder, about Carl Panzram with James Woods. Really good performance. And Spec. I would say this is the better and more accurate Richard Speck film than the one, of course, by Michael Pfeiffer, again with Cora Nemec as Speck, but Chicago Massacre, Richard Speck. I would say the other one was far more accurate and better as a film than this one. The Alphabet Killer, I have not got around to seeing this one yet. At some point I'll check it out. I've heard it's pretty fictional, like a fictionalized account of the real life 1972 or 74 double initial or alphabet murders out of Rochester, New York. This one I did not enjoy. This is more of a mass murder, but Killer Next Door about John List. Lonely Hearts. This is one I actually keep forgetting that I have. This is one that I do need to check out. This I reviewed a while ago, but this was a case I was kind of obsessed with for a while in American Crime. The death of the murder of Sylvia Likens. I've seen The Girl Next Door. That was more of a fictional account. And actually, I forgot to mention 2 books that I don't have here because they're at my mother's house is House of Evil about this, and Sue Klebold's A Mother's Reckoning. Both of those books I do have, but my mom is borrowing them. I do like this film. I like this more than The Girl Next Door. And this isn't really a serial killer film. It kind of just ended up here because it's true crime, but I am Elizabeth Smart. At some point, I'll check that out. And then the last few that I have is another Uwe Lamel film, Baseline Killer, about Mark Dutroux. I'm not that excited to check it out. Zodiac. Now, this is not the David Fincher film, though I do have the David Fincher film. And this is not the Uwe Lamel film. This is some other Zodiac film that I didn't even know was out. But there's another one like Curse of the Zodiac, where it's like so many years later. Again, not interested. This isn't serial killer. Again, ended up here because of true crime. Wonderland, about John Holmes and the Wonderland murders. Not a bad movie. Maybe at some point I'll review it when I'm just doing true crime or murders, not really serial killers. This is probably the best Son of Sam film, but I avoided reviewing it because it's a fictional story, kind of like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where the serial killer, real-life serial killer story is the backdrop. It is a fictional story in the foreground, but that's Summer of Sam. All the Berkowitz stuff is handled wonderfully, but it's not enough of a Berkowitz film for me to want to review it or feel the need to review it, unfortunately. Now, and again, I have a whole list of other ones to get to. TV movies, other movies. I know there's more. There's a movie and a series on John Christie, 10 Related Place. There's like 2 or 3 other films on Ted Kaczynski. There's the other Boston Strangler film. There's another TV movie on Eileen Wuornos. There's even another Henry Lee Lucas film called Confessions of a Serial Killer that's more fictional. I've got a list of about 20 to 30 other serial killer movies to get to. So, again, I got in my wish list about 50 other, actually, well over 100 other books, and probably about 30 to 50 other documentaries and just as many films to eventually get to. So chances are I've heard of it and it's already on my list. But so that is my entire true crime serial killer collection, from books to documentaries to movies to collectibles. I didn't think it was going to be this long of a video, but I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for watching.